Welcome to another episode. I'm your host, Ryan Richards, residential loan officer and real estate investor here in New England. And today I'm bringing another solo episode where I deep dive into what I've learned throughout the course of real estate investing and what I wish I knew when I first started, and some advice for those who are thinking about getting into it, and some thought processes and resources they can utilize to be successful. So hope you enjoy. So it's been about a year now since I've acquired my first property, and there's a lot of things that you learn while owning property and going through the process yourself that there would have been no way for you to learn beforehand. So if you're thinking about getting in real estate investing, my number one piece of advice is to get comfortable with the fact that you're not going to have all of the answers. There's just no way you could possibly have a solution ready and an answer for every possible situation or problem that arises, because there's some anomalies. I still talk to some investors about what I'm going through, and sometimes they're like, look, I own 100 units. I've been doing this for 30 years and I've never seen that. So there's always situations that arise, and that's the beauty of being in real estate. And really one of the skills you need to hone in on is being a problem solver. Real estate investors at scale are master problem solvers. That's the nature of the business to its core, from finding a deal, sourcing it, to being able to execute on the closing and then execute on your business plan. Ultimately, it's a mastery of problem solving. So understand that going into it. If you're someone who doesn't like to deal with headaches or doesn't like to deal with sometimes very unreasonable problems, then real estate investing might be something you look at from a different lens. Maybe you invest as a passive investment in, a syndication, or you partner with someone who does the work and you provide the funds. There's different ways to invest in real estate that allow you to not have to look at the headaches. Maybe you have a property manager, whatever the case. But if you plan to own and operate your units solely, by yourself, you're the operator, highly recommend you understand that it's not going to be a seamless process. But the beauty in it is, since purchasing that first property about a year ago, I've come a long way in terms of fine-tuning and developing my mindset so I know how to handle problems. I might not know the answer, but I know where to turn to. And that's, the second big piece that I would highly recommend if you're considering getting into investing, is building out your network, because you're not going to have all the answers to the problems, but you need to know where to turn to get answers when problems arise. So building a rock star team, having a great realtor, having a great lender, both of whom ideally own properties themselves, so that they can speak to their knowledge and experiences on things that they've already gone through and give you real life relations and solutions to problems you're fixing. So having an investor focused agent who owns property, is involved in multifamily, and helps clients do the same. Very similarly, having a loan officer who understands multifamily, finding the right program structures for you. Super important to be able to bring that insight and experience to what you're doing. It's been the biggest help for me in progressing forward and progressing quickly. As you begin to develop that network, you start to attend networking meetings, you start to attend meetups, meeting other investors, other operators. Really important to immerse yourself in the real estate community if you really want to be a successful investor and operator. The Bigger Pockets community was one that was extremely valuable to me. They have tons of resources, online forums, blogs, books, podcasts. You name it, they have resources out there. And there's a lot of information you can learn within that community. Consider listening to their podcasts, dive into what they have available for book resources. I think I've read almost all of Brandon Turner's books, which he's one of the founders of Bigger Pockets. They really give you the foundation for being able to understand real estate investing. What are some of the successful practices you need to take to be successful in real estate investing, and give you the foundation to know who to turn to. They talk a lot about systems, processes, understanding what is needed to operate a property successfully and how to grow and scale quickly. So a lot of information within there, and highly recommend delving into all the resources that are out there. There are a lot of other resources out there, like podcasts such as this one, that can continue to help you grow and develop your mindset around real estate investing. And ultimately, those resources lay a great foundation, but book knowledge, research, listening alone will only get you so far. And it becomes a point where you have to take that first step. And it's hard to do because there are a lot of questions you have that you don't know answers to yet. And there are a lot of problems you haven't faced and solutions you haven't thought of. But you have to have confidence in yourself that you will be able to get through those things. And that's really important, with real estate investing, is getting your mindset right. Not only around operating, solving problems, but understanding that imperfect action sometimes is the best solution. So if you're thinking about buying your first property, you've done your homework, you're like, look, I've been to meetups, I know a few operators, I have an agent I could talk to who owns property, I have a lender I can talk to, which if it's not me, you're mistaken. But there comes a point when you have to take that step. You have to buy that first property, get yourself pre-approved, start looking, close on that first property and begin to operate, because until you get there, you'll have analysis by paralysis. You can underwrite every deal in the entire country and find 15 different ways for it to work, 15 different ways for it to not work, and 100 reasons why you shouldn't buy it or it doesn't make sense. But that's why you have the guidance around you and the resources to bounce things off of. Investor-focused agents and lenders, they'll run numbers for you. They'll run numbers with you. They'll help you underwrite properties. And when you have a few people who've done it before telling you it's a good deal, and you believe in yourself enough to be able to take on that first property and say, all right, I can manage this, then there becomes that point where you have to take that step. You have to be able to be confident and comfortable walking into situations where you're uncomfortable. And ultimately through that, you'll take every problem that comes to you and turn it into a positive learning experience. And that's really been my experience through real estate investing. There's, I'm sure, dozens of different stories I could tell. And anyone who's been in real estate investing for any amount of time that owns a considerable number of units will, I'm sure, have their share of success and horror stories. But the things you never thought of that come up that ultimately you just have to deal with, For example, I've had to deal with bed bugs. My tenant burned down my shed. I actually walked over to the property and they were both swinging axes at about 8:30 in the morning on a Saturday drinking beer. So that's a situation that I've never thought I would find myself in, but you have to figure out how to deal with it. So, I ended up calling up an investor friend of mine and said, hey, what would you do in this situation? After I confronted them, like, what's my next step? I didn't want to go the police route just because I didn't want to create any real tension through my tenants. So I ended up driving to the fire station and calling them and saying, hey, I have a couple tenants open burning in my backyard without a permit. Can you go over there and talk to them and put it out? So they went over there and put it out without getting the police involved, because I didn't want to make it a confrontational scenario, given they were already 6 months into their eviction with me and I was not willing to extend. So in other scenarios, you're dealing with people. So naturally, everyone has different upbringings. Everyone thinks about things differently. And some people, unfortunately, aren't ideal members of society. So not to say that that's every tenant, but you're dealing with people. So some people are criminals. Some people are doctors. Everyone has their own way of going about their life. And as a landlord, the more units you own, the more times you encounter those people. And they're not just one interaction. Any client-facing business you have, there's usually some standard of time on you interact with them. But when you're someone's landlord, they're your person that they call or talk to about their housing situation 24/7. They live there all day, all night, all year. So naturally, you're going to run into more challenges. And that's, again, a huge part of it is just dealing with people. Handling those situations, thinking rationally, how can I best approach the situation? What is my solution? Who should I call to get some advice or talk to if you need it on a particular situation? Another one I had was bed bugs. Never been into bed bugs. Who pays for bed bugs, right? That's always the question. Something I never would have thought of. If you have bed bugs in your house, it should be the tenant. But then if you as a landlord don't pay for the bed bugs and they spread to other units, now it's your problem. Now you have to deal with bed bugs across multiple units. So understanding how to talk with your tenant, negotiate that, and approach it, again, it's really all psychological. I'm trying to help you. Let's make a deal. I don't have to help you. I could put it all on you, but I want to help you. But now that changes the conversation, right? From, hey, it's your problem. You deal with it. Don't text me back until it's done. I don't care. Some landlords do that. But at the end of the day, it's a relationship. So the better you are to your tenants, the better they are to you. And that's really how I've tried to navigate everything I do as far as a landlord. But those types of situations you get through, whether it's renovating a unit, whether it's construction, you're dealing with electrical issues, plumbing issues. If you don't have a trade experience, you're not going to have a solution or a thought to where to get contractors or how to fix a certain problem. So you need people you can talk to, other landlords who can give you, their preferred vendors who they've already vetted and worked with on dozens of projects. That's been a huge advantage for me. That's really helped me to continue to grow and manage properties efficiently, is having trusted contractors. Have people you can call who come out when they say they're going to. They get you numbers that you can rely on when it comes to quotes, get the job done efficiently, and make valuable recommendations on the repairs that are needed to be done. Super important. And as you go over time, the more units you own or the longer you own properties, you become that investor that you talked to in the beginning. You build out your own vendor lists. Now you have 3 or 4 plumbers you can call. You have 3 or 4 handymen you can call. You have a couple general contractors. You have an electrician. You have a pest guy. You have exterminators. So you build out that list over time, but you're not going to be able to get that list in place beforehand. So get a good foundation, have people you can talk to. Very similarly, what's been a great resource for me that I wish I learned sooner was Facebook groups. They are an incredible resource for gaining access to labor. So example, I had some concrete work I needed done at one of my properties. My contractor doesn't really do concrete work. My paving guy only does paving. I'm at a loss. What do I do? I already bugged the same investor I bugged a few times for his contractors. So I'm like, I'll do this on my own. I remember one of the previous meetups I went to, again, real estate meetup, great place to meet people who are in the game and who have resources you can leverage. But I went to a Facebook group. I posted in the Blackstone Town Facebook group, a couple thousand members, looking for a concrete guy in the Blackstone area. Anyone have any recommendations? Within like 30 minutes, I got a few names. I called a few of them, vetted them, look at their reviews. The good part is though, they've already been vetted by the person referring them. And usually there's a couple different people chiming in on one person. So ultimately I picked the person that kind of popped up the most after calling a few different people. And that's a start, right? You don't have to use them, but get them out, get them to give you a quote, see how they work, see how they interact. Do you like their style of business? Do they do things timely? Are they responsive? Do they honor their word? Hey, I'll be there tomorrow at 7. They text you the night before, I can't be there till 10. I got a job, kicks it off till 1 p.m. 1 p.m. comes, they look at it, I'll get you a quote by tomorrow. Quote comes Tuesday, 3 days after they said they would. Is that a kind of person you want to work with? Maybe not. So you call the next person in line and you start to figure out who works the way you want to. And that's ultimately how you build relationships, but it's through doing. So if you don't have that trusted person you can go to get that connection, highly recommend Facebook groups. They've been a really great resource and just do your homework afterwards. But in a similar fashion, I had a scenario like that did not work in my favor. I had an electrician I was doing some knob and tube work on one of my properties and ultimately didn't do the work he said he was going to. But at the time, I didn't know enough in electrical to understand what should have been done. I'm not an electrician. Electrical is not my thing. I'm the kind of person where my hands are wet and not touching the toaster. I don't know anything about electrical and I don't want to know anything about electrical. But it didn't work in my favor in this case. And I got taken advantage of by an electrician who I was referred to through someone who I didn't really know, but thought of as a professional in the industry. So going back on it, I've learned that I would do things a lot differently. I would make sure that in the scope of work that they outlined to me, they give me every detail of what they're going to do and explain it to me, put it in the scope of work so that we're both on the same page as far as what needs to be done. So I know what to look for in the work when it's finished. So there's going to be those types of projects where you don't quite know exactly what they need to do to fix it because maybe it's outside of your scope of knowledge, but making sure you're both really clear what needs to be done. And if it's in writing, especially with a contractor you don't know, is really important. Similarly with deposits, that's something I learned that I didn't really think was going to be something to discuss, right? You hire a new contractor, they're going to pave your driveway. How much do you give them for a deposit? Do you give them 50%? Some people say, I'll give me 100% up front. Well, that's obviously not an option, but coming up with a payment structure, do you pay them a third up front, a third in the middle, a third at the end? Do you just pay for materials? And then you pay them for the labor at the end. What type of structure makes sense for you? And there's a lot of, different ways of looking at that depending on the project. But thinking through those things is really important. Making sure your contractors have proper liability coverage. Do they have an insurance policy? If you hire out a few guys to come do some work on your property, they're not insured. One of them slips and falls or cuts their finger off. Who do you think they're going to call to pay for the bill? You. So you got to make sure they have proper liability coverage. Similarly with permits, make sure you're doing the proper things when it comes to permitting work. It can get very messy if you don't do that properly, manage it properly. It can cost you a lot of money. If the city gets involved with, unpermitted work or comes down on you for some things you probably should have done better. So just make sure you're making educated decisions around that. And like I said, great resources to talk to someone in the business who you trust, whether it's an investor, contractor, get their opinion to be able to make the best decision you can on something like that. So going forward, one thing that I've really tried to implement as I continue to manage properties, own properties, and hopefully grow and scale that I wish I knew at the beginning was determining what your vision is for your real estate investing career. Like any business, right? If you're going to own a business and operate a business, you should have a 5 or 10 year plan and do it at the beginning. If you don't have a plan at the beginning, there'll be things you wish you would have done at the beginning had you thought about it. So one of my plans going forward is to systematize my business, right? Get people in place so that I don't have to be as involved. I don't want to take the tenants' maintenance calls. I don't want to deal with my contractors. I don't want to deal with leasing. So who can I get in place to do that? And then if I get someone, how do I implement that seamlessly? So that means outlining a system. So giving them a step-by-step guide of how I do business so that when I hire my next person, whether it be a general maintenance technician, a general property manager, I can give them, here are my systems. Here's what I do. Here's how I lease my properties. Here's what I like for photos. Here's how I work with my contractors. So it becomes seamless. So throughout my time of owning the properties, I'm beginning to build out my systems. So I have my list of here's how I do what I do. So when I hire someone, I can just give them the list, they run with it, call me with questions. So something that's really important is think about it at the beginning. In a very similar vein, tracking your accounting, super important. As you continue to grow and scale, you need to be able to show your financials to lenders, show your financials to CPAs to file your taxes properly. If you're raising money from third-party investors, investors want to see your books. They want to know your books, one, show you're profitable, but they want to know it looks professional. If someone came to you and said, hey, look, I'd like to borrow $100,000 to buy this property, and you say, how much, what do the numbers look like? And they say, oh, I have them right here on this back of my Dunkin' Donuts bag is this, look at it, says you're going to make 20% on your money. How confident would you feel in that versus if you said, I'm looking for a $100,000 investment. Here are my full financials for my previous properties. Here's my track record. Here's a book of all the properties I've done. Here's my portfolio. Here's my projected returns on this property. Nice organized spreadsheet. That carries a lot more weight. So really important to have your financials in order, track your accounting, keep your receipts. One software I've found that's really helpful for that is called Stessa. It was recommended to me by actually one of my cousins who's been a longtime real estate investor. Super easy to manage, super easy to use. Keeps track of all your receipts, uses AI. So if you take a picture of your receipt, upload it to the app, it'll actually read this receipt in its entirety, categorize it by expense, and bookmark it and keep a copy of that receipt in the application. So at the end of the year, when you go to file your taxes, you go on the app, you download your profit and loss statement for the year or an itemized record of account, send it to your accountant with all the receipts in there. So it makes it very easy to click through, get finances where you need to go. It'll prepare financial statements for you. You can look at your balance sheets, you can look at your rent rolls, cash flow analysis. It will show you your cash on cash returns. So it's a really powerful software. In addition to, it's become a document hub for me. So I keep all my insurance policies in there, all my receipts, my deposits for contracts, vendors, whatever the case, my HUDs for my sales, purchase and sale agreements, inspections, appraisals, all my documents are within one place. So very easy to manage and use. And it also serves as my rent collection portal. So all my tenants, ideally, it's always that guy or two who wants to pay cash, which is what it is, but collects rent right through the portal. So they set up an online account, they go ahead and connect their bank account, and they can pay right online through the account automatically. One good thing as well is you can connect your bank accounts. So my business banking account is connected to my software. So anytime I swipe my business card or make a transaction purchase on the card, that data automatically pulls into my accounting software and gets categorized and itemized so I can see at the end of the year all my transactions at once without having to go manually enter all the different accounts. So really great, really easy. And one other huge bonus I will say of Stessa is that the account that you hold your deposits in is at a 5% interest rate. So you're getting 5% in a high yields checking account, which is unbelievable. But something to really consider as you have to pay for the full year membership. But if you are going to pay for the membership, I think it's $20 a month. Highly recommend it because you do get those massive interest boosts. One disadvantage to Stessa, for those of you who are considering it as a platform, it doesn't allow for any tenant communication. There's no interaction with the tenants in the app. And there's really no tenant portal. They just pay their rent and that's it. There's no tenant interaction versus some of the other softwares like Rent Ready are very tenant facing. So there's a lot more interaction. They can submit maintenance requests, upload photos, streamline tenant communications, mass emails, mass texts. This is not the platform for that. But if you want something that's really, really good at accounting and making things easy, highly recommend it. So that's something I recommend, again, you do at the beginning, because if you wait 3, 4, or 5 months to do it, now you have a backlog of paperwork. You'll find those Home Depot receipts that are tucked in the corners of your car and your bookcase, whatever, and it becomes a lot more work. So do it as you go. You can just take out your phone, quick picture, upload to the app, it categorizes it, and on you go. So definitely recommend doing that sooner as you prepare to grow and scale. So real estate is always an evolution. It's always, what problems do I have? What inefficiencies do I have? How can I improve upon those, make them better, make them streamlined so your business can continue to run more and more efficiently, which is really the core of any business. But especially in real estate, it's the problem solving aspect and being okay with taking that first step, that imperfect action, trying out a new software you don't have or haven't tried before, exploring different strategies with raising rents, with managing tenants, communicating with tenants. How do you go about your daily business? It's all about continually trying to get better and improve upon the inefficiencies within your business and being okay with being in uncomfortable situations, knowing that you're going to navigate those the best you possibly can, and the outcome will be growth and improvement. So now 10 things that I wish I knew when I first got into real estate investing, and hopefully you can use those to better set yourself up to acquire your first property, continue to grow, and just continue to get better. If you ever want to talk about real estate, you want to pick my brain on other resources you can use, what about some podcast recommendations aside from this one? What about some real estate meetups? I'm looking to talk to investors. How can I meet more people? Reach out to me anytime. You can find me Finance with Team Richards on Instagram, or Google my name, Ryan Richards with North Point Mortgage, and you'll find all my info online. So hope to see you again soon. And as always, if you enjoyed the show, please leave a like, leave a comment, leave a review. It's how this gets to more people. And that's always the goal, is to help as many people get into real estate investing as possible.